Chris Hart. What are we discussing today, Sophia?
Today we are focusing on marriage, and love is a beautiful thing, so is marriage, and many people, especially those who are married, suffer and have the risk of infidelity taking place. And so today we are posing the question, is it possible to affair-proof your marriage? Can you have your marriage immunized from infidelity, if that is even a way of looking at it? So, Chris Hart, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us yet again this morning for this discussion, because important for many married people, when you say and you exchange those vows, they're really meant to be for a lifetime, at least.
Yes.
The ideal situation.
Indeed.
We know with changing times there are people who get into marriage for all manner of reasons, but ideally you exchange the vows, it's for life, it's with this person you want to spend the rest of your life until death do you part. But more and more we keep hearing of cases of infidelity, and I guess the place to begin is when we're talking about cheating or infidelity or affair-proofing it. What are we talking about? What would bring this kind of situations around?
First of all, you're quite right. People do almost invariably go into marriage with the intention of being faithful.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few rogues around.
Yeah.
Of both sexes, let's be blunt.
True.
But assuming you've chosen somebody wisely, then that's everybody's intention. The trouble is, the statistics are very much against them. The vast majority of marriages are affected by infidelity at some point.
Okay.
And so one of the most important things you can do is, as you go into marriage, is to be aware of that and realize what the risks are. It's very much too easy to be naive and to take everything for granted.
Right.
And if you do that, then you're leaving yourself wide open.
Right. So it's always good and important, even though somebody has never given you a reason to think they'd cheat, to still be aware it's a possibility, and to have your A game always throughout your marriage.
Absolutely. I mean, what people don't realize is how easy it is to slip into an infidelity.
Right.
I mean, leaving aside the rogues, there are many ways in which people can start, and most of them are accidental and unintentional. People just find themselves suddenly sitting next to somebody at work, and they look into their eyes and they realize, and they never intended. It wasn't in the game plan.
Yeah.
A huge amount of, let's call them emotional contacts at work, drift into some sort of infidelity.
Right.
And to be honest, no amount of, let's call them values and morals or anything like that, can protect you.
Yeah.
At the moment when it happens, there's no protection.
There's no protection. So you have to be conscious and aware that it's a possibility. You're not Superman or Superwoman or an angel.
Yep, that's exactly right.
It can happen to the best of us.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course what tends to happen is that in marriages where people are not thinking about infidelity, what tends to happen is they start to, to be blunt, they drift. You start off with a great deal of excitement and a great deal of fun, and a huge amount of intimacy. And then you fast forward 2 or 3 years, and you find that all they ever talk about is just the diary and who's taking the kids to school, and the relationship has become dull and flat, and there's no sex. And
they come to bed with a T-shirt written "Ngombe,"
And then, of course, you're at great risk.
And you regret. And let's begin first even by breaking down when we're talking about cheating, because the misconception is that cheating is purely and simply when a man or a woman sleep with somebody outside the union. But that is not all cheating is about.
I mean, to be honest, the real stereotype is that it's always the man, which of course is not true. I mean, for every man there is a woman, and to be honest, it really is a 50-50 business. So you must watch your wife just as thoroughly as she must watch you.
Yeah.
That's the starting point. The second thing is that infidelity very rarely starts with somebody deliberately going out with the intention of having an affair.
Yeah, walking out and saying, today I'm going to cheat.
Exactly. Doesn't happen. What normally happens is something is going wrong in the marriage, and somebody starts, well, to be blunt, talking about it to somebody at work, a friend, something of that sort.
Right.
And they discover that that person is sympathetic and is taking an interest, and you start a slippery slope. That's the commonest approach.
Okay, so it begins with conversations, and perhaps for some it's experiencing some challenges at home or any other kind of a problem, and they begin to feel safe in talking to somebody else other than their spouse.
Yes, I mean, it's worse than just a relationship going flat, a lot of relationships get into a place where actually it's difficult to talk. If I start to tell my wife about my feelings, she's actually critical of me or contemptuous, and suddenly I realise I don't want to start this conversation because I know how it's going to go.
Right.
And then I discover that the person who's next to me at work is actually okay with me telling them this story.
Yeah.
So I start telling the people at work about my problems rather than my wife. We're in very deep trouble when you start doing
deep trouble when that happens. And we want to invite our viewers, if you're watching this morning, you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us. Numbers will shortly be on your screens. If you have a question or a comment, participate as we delve now into, we've talked a little about the affairs, but proofing the relationship, immunization, getting that injection into the marriage to ensure that does not happen. What is the first step? And I know you've already mentioned is that realization and being aware to the fact that it's a possibility and not being ignorant.
Yes. I mean, actually, there's a step before that. I mean, you must not marry a rogue.
Okay.
It really is important. You know, if you meet somebody in a bar and they obviously spend all their weekends out getting on the town, you know, you are going to have a rough time.
Yeah.
So start by watching the person you're dating and trying to make up your mind what sort of life they lead, male or female. And if you're in the slightest bit suspicious, well, find somebody else, because that's one of the biggest indications. If somebody's already in that lifestyle where they're footloose and fancy-free, the chances isn't changing just because you've got a piece of paper to wave at them.
Yeah, you're married now.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
So marry somebody who clearly has got the sort of lifestyle that's intended to be faithful.
All right. What if they had cheated before in the relationship prior to the marriage and have come and said, you know, this is not going to happen again. Once you get married, you know, it's just me and you. Do you trust such a person? Do you give them that chance and let them see and prove themselves?
I think, providing they haven't got a terrifying lifestyle, and providing it only ever happens once, it's okay. You can forgive almost anything once. But if you begin to detect the build-up towards another attempt at infidelity, then obviously you should really cut things off and go to somebody else.
Okay.
In a funny way, having some sort of minor infidelity before marriage is a very timely warning, and those couples can often be stronger just because they realize that it is possible. You know, the biggest danger is, you know, when you're young and romance is in the air, you think, it can never happen to me. And so, of course, you're very naive. You don't want to be naive. That is one of the most important ways of affair-proofing your marriage. Don't be naive. So, yes, if you have one small incident before marriage, something hopefully fairly trivial, by all means forgive, but do a lot of talking and do a lot of watching and convince yourself that it really was a one-off.
All right, so begin by just checking the relationship as has been. So for somebody who's already married and had already seen the signs initially, then really they cannot be blaming anybody if it's happening in marriage. Number two is that awareness. It's a possibility, so every day I'm working to ensure it does not happen.
Yes.
What else do you do to affair-proof?
Well, that's basically it. Don't be naive. Monitor yourself, monitor your spouse. Monitor yourself in the sense of, am I treating my spouse well? Am I making it a pleasure for them to come home? You don't want, for example, your husband to be one of these people who thinks as he finishes his second beer, do I want to go home or do I have a third beer? Well, if you're going to bite his head off, he'll probably choose the beer. So don't be that person. Make sure that home is where he wants to be, where she wants to be.
And isn't just dating, even in marriage, important to do? We hear everybody giving advice to people intending to get married, say, keep dating, keep doing those things you did before you got married, you know, because it's this and this that made me get attracted to you. Perhaps every time you'd cook this amazing meal, and you get married and you're so busy and you never cook. There's just household doing all the cooking. And so you don't do those things and somebody else is cooking elsewhere. So it's also about just maintaining something.
It certainly is. I mean, I don't think couples really need to date in the sense of going off to some fancy, very expensive restaurant. That's very much what we do when we're courting. But you must have excitement in the marriage. There must be a little bit of novelty always there, whether it's a new recipe or a walk in the park, or it doesn't matter what it is. And you know, there's got to be a little bit of novelty all the time. And if there isn't, relationships go very flat.
Yeah. Because also, and sometimes it's looking out for the signs that could signal there's something that's about to begin, an affair could be in the works, and making sure it doesn't go perhaps the full way.
I mean, if you begin to realize that you've hardly spoken to your spouse for 3 weeks, and they're beginning to spend more and more time at work, and when they do come home, there's there's an air of something, you're not getting along too well. If you haven't started to wonder about whether an affair is likely, then you're frankly being naive, because what you want is the exact reverse. You want your spouse to come home as fast as possible, and you want them to have a big smile on their face all evening, and you want something fun to be happening all the time. If that's not happening, you're in the right area for an affair.
Yeah. So some form of change in pattern, that should be a signal that perhaps you need to be more attentive. You need to look, perhaps they register to go to gym, they want to look all good.
It's really true. Most affairs are detected not by finding an SMS on a phone or something like that. It's because you begin to realize that your spouse is changing in some subtle way. They've started buying a different brand of soap. They're coming home at different times. They're buying their petrol in a different petrol station.
Yes.
All these little signs that say something in their life is changing. And if they've got a bit of a spring in their step, there's obviously a bit of
happy
fun.
to go to work.
Happy to go to work, yes.
Yeah.
Then you should be very worried.
All right, let's speak to Eric, who's calling us from Kayole, as we continue the conversation. Eric, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Thanks for calling. Share with us your comment or question.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Hart. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Eric. I just wanted to ask something. I have a feeling that my fiancée is having an extra affair with somebody. Where she's working. She's working in a restaurant, or where she indulges with quite a number of men. But most of the time when I'm with her, she doesn't want to pick the calls when I'm with her. She either go outside or to the kitchen to pick her calls. How can you advise me to handle this situation? Because I'm 90% sure that something is happening somewhere.
Eric, before we let you go, have you asked her about it? Have you had a conversation about the same?
Yeah.
Eric?
Okay. I normally bring that conversation, but she always wants to cut it off immediately. She doesn't want to discuss it so much. Yeah. So she's violent when I'm asking her about what about these calls at night? Why are you not picking them when I'm next to you? So she doesn't want to hear anything about it.
And how long have you been together?
We've been together for 1.5 years now.
And engaged for?
For 1.5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see what Chris will have to say about that. Thank you for watching and for calling in. So these calls that are coming in, she does not want to answer them in front of him.
Right. I mean, obviously that is very suspicious.
Yeah.
And he's right to be suspicious. The trouble is that she's doing the classic thing. He hasn't really got any evidence, and so of course she is denying everything, and that's what she'll continue to do until he gets something very concrete to put in front of her. So the best thing he can do is not to raise the subject again at all. As far as she's concerned, he's lost interest. He doesn't suspect her of anything. But what, of course, he should do is he should watch her like a hawk. He should be watching for any sign at all of what's going on. And sooner or later, she will slip up. And he will have something very concrete to confront her with. And at that point, he can raise the subject again. It's very important not to go through the denial phase when you're dealing with an infidelity. If you start a long exchange of, no, I didn't, then it's sometimes very, very difficult to get to the point. So he needs to avoid doing that. Just watch like a hawk. Sooner or later, she'll do something.
You know, Chris, it's hard not to do that, because I'm imagining a situation where we're seated together and we're watching a movie or something, or we're having dinner, and your phone rings, you ignore it, or you're constantly walking away. I mean, I won't come back and be like, oh, so as we were saying, or we're having a conversation or continue watching
Yes.
and just happy and all smiles. I mean, it's human nature to feel, you know, and you get angry because you're thinking, this keeps happening every day, what is going on? So isn't it hard for him to just
It is hard.
suck it in and...
Yeah, I accept that, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you see, if he's got to the point where he's totally convinced, then he should frankly break off the relationship.
Yeah.
If he has no solid evidence at all, then he's better watching very carefully and waiting for her to slip up. And at some point she'll do something very foolish. You know, she'll, for example, she'll tell him she's going to Kisumu and he'll find a flight stub for Mombasa or
place.
something. And
Yeah.
at that point, of course, he can say, now come on, tell me the truth.
Yeah. Okay, because also, Chris, what would happen is it could get somebody to now start snooping. You know, when she walks away again, you want to grab that phone.
yeah.
The phone becomes the object of interest because you're
Yeah.
wondering what is going on with this particular gadget, who's
yes.
talking, with the messages, the insecurity.
Yes, yes, and I hate to say this, but he will start snooping, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But you see, people can be remarkably clever when it comes to hiding their tracks, especially if they realize that their partner is getting suspicious. Suddenly you discover that, you know, the numbers in the phone have got strange names against them, something very plausible, and the SMSs say things like, when's my carpet being delivered, you know, which means come to the hotel immediately.
Yeah.
You can't prove a thing.
True.
You do not want to alert the person that you're suspicious.
Oh, watchman took
Yes.
the name.
Yes, yes.
You're wondering, this watchman called an awfully lot of times.
Yeah, exactly. So you get the idea.
Yes.
It's better to back off and watch. And of course, like I say, if he's really convinced, really suspicious, really uncomfortable, end the relationship.
Exactly. And the good thing, I don't think it's good, but at least he's not married yet.
Absolutely.
Right? They're engaged. So as you say, it's for him to evaluate. If it's too much to take in, if really they kind of get to a place where they're having a conversation and consensus, then, I mean,
You know,
he's a young
the
man,
long
I
and short of
suppose.
it is this: you mustn't marry somebody you are suspicious of, somebody you don't trust, somebody you can't be 100% honest with.
True.
The worst thing about what he's experiencing is not the possibility that she's a tiny bit sweet on someone at work. It's the fact that she's not telling the truth.
Exactly, yeah.
She's not saying to him what's going on. And of course that undermines a relationship terribly.
Yeah.
So you can almost say that the thing that ends relationships before you marry is not a little bit of flirting, it's dishonesty. And so if he can't at some point have a conversation with her where she's 100% honest to him about what's going
Right.
on, I think he'd be very unwise to marry her.
Exactly. So, Eric, there you go. You had it from the expert. But also back to proofing a marriage and having this couple that is going through marriage, is going through life. Isn't it important that you also sit down and outline boundaries as a couple in terms of what I'm uncomfortable with and what you're uncomfortable with? Because sometimes you're not going to be uncomfortable with the same things, but I can say, you know, when this and this happens, it makes me feel this way.
Yes.
Isn't that important?
It is important. In fact, it's one of those stages that good relationships go through quite early on. Maybe as little as 6 to 8 weeks into the relationship. You've not long met. You've just got to the point where you begin to realize this is serious.
Yeah.
One of the first things you should do is agree that you are an item and that you are uncomfortable with the other person, flirting, doing whatever. And then define what flirting is,
Right.
where the boundaries are, what's
Yeah.
okay for you to do at work, for example, and what's not okay for you to do at work.
Okay.
So there's a real understanding between you.
Between the both parties. Sarah, good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for calling. Share with us your question or comment.
I wanted to ask the doctor a question. I'm pregnant, 8 months pregnant. And my husband is moving out with my best friend.
So you're married.
And when... Sorry?
You say you're married and your husband is dating your best friend.
Yeah.
Do you have evidence?
Yeah, because I've even met them so many times. He even admitted that he has even slept with the guy.
Okay, he's admit. Okay, so what's your question?
So what can I do? What can I do? Because I'm feeling even having an abortion.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Married, 8 months pregnant, has been cheating with her best friend, and he's even admitted it.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
sad state of affairs.
Yes, it is a sad state of affairs. I think she should do two things simultaneously. The first thing is she should get some advice, begin to contemplate separating from him, begin to think about where she might live, where she might perhaps change her job, whatever. Talk to a lawyer about child support. Begin to start the process of being firmly on her own 2 feet. And at the same time, she should talk with her man in a very friendly way. I know that's going to be a bit tough, but screaming matches won't help at this stage. What she should be saying is, tell me what's going on. What do we need to do to put all this right? Now, if she's doing both those things, she's going to come out ahead because one of them's going to happen. She will either end up separating or she will end up with him admitting what's going on, not just admitting, but saying why. And they have a chance then of putting it right. I hate to say this, but it's quite common for affairs to start when something significant is going on in a relationship, like a pregnancy or a birth. I think you can imagine why people get distracted by something nice. It often happens when somebody has a new job because they're busy in their new job, they're neglecting their partner. Their partner starts to stray. So if she does both those things, prepares for the worst, but at the same time really in a very friendly, very teamwork sort of way, talks to her man, there's a good chance that she'll come out ahead.
Okay. Yeah, because when a person is already just outright coming forward and telling you they're cheating and then, making it worse, it's with somebody known to both parties, then it will take a great deal of strength if she in fact wants to continue staying on in the marriage to be able to pull through this particular period.
Yes. I mean, part of the problem is this. He probably thinks she's helpless. He probably thinks, 8 months pregnant, not a lot she can do.
Right.
So of course he's mistreating her. If he begins to realize that she's getting more independent and she's standing up a little taller, then there's a good chance he'll start to regret what he's doing. So that's another reason why it's a good thing to start talking to a lawyer. A good feeder lawyer, for example, who knows how these things are done.
Yeah.
She will begin to think, okay, whatever happens, I'm going to come out of this okay. And if I have to leave the relationship, so be it.
Okay.
That will actually motivate him to do something about it.
And just to touch on what you just mentioned, so when big things are happening in either of the spouses' lives, it's important for each to ensure they're still not neglecting their partner because, and I'm not saying that's what she's doing, but you'll find for some pregnant women, they'll just be, we know there's fashion for the pregnant women. You can still look the part and be, so that your husband, who's a man, normal man, can still find you.
Yes, I mean, it's not, as I say, just pregnancy. It's the whole of life.
Yeah.
And whenever something really significant happens in your life, people tend to become somewhat preoccupied. They become focused on their own issues, whether it's the new job, the new baby, whatever it is. And they become neglectful. And that's not necessarily about, buying the right sort of makeup. It's just simply not paying attention, not greeting them nicely, not listening to their tale of their day and all the rest of it. And to be honest, most relationships end not because of some disaster, but because of neglect. And the path is usually, I'm being ignored, I'm getting frustrated and fed up, maybe I'm being criticized a lot. I start talking to somebody at work, I discover they're very receptive, suddenly I'm on a slippery slope.
Yeah, and also when it comes to about talking to somebody, I guess the most important thing is when there's trouble or some form of stress or whatever it is to always try and have those conversations internally in the marriage. And when there's need to perhaps have somebody different to reason, because you might feel, since my problem is with Chris, talking to Chris doesn't help because Chris thinks he's right, I think I'm right, perhaps have a counselor, a third party, but with the two as part of the conversation.
I mean, first of all, you're dead right. The ideal thing to do is to talk to your spouse about whatever's worrying you. But as I mentioned earlier, it's very common for the spouse to be preempting that, stopping it happening by being critical, being unavailable, being cold. So you find that you can't raise these subjects with your spouse. Now, at that point, you're very right. In a perfect world, you'd go straight to a counsellor, somebody professional who's not going to try and have an affair with you. And then you can talk about how to deal with it and bring the spouse along and have a three-way conversation.
Right.
But in reality,
Most don't.
most of the conversations start with the person next to you at work.
Yeah.
I mean, you know
They'll
them
ask you
well.
what's wrong.
Yes, exactly.
That's how it starts.
It's
Simple.
exactly how it starts.
Can we go have lunch and you can talk about it?
Yeah.
Glass of wine.
Mm.
10 glasses. All right, let's talk to Fadil calling us from Mombasa. Fadil, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for calling. Share with us your comment or question.
Yeah, I have a question I would like to ask Mr. Chris. Okay, I had a lady to whom I had engaged to, and we had actually formalized the whole thing, the whole process of getting married. But then I discovered she was lying to me. And then I decided, because I did my own investigation, I actually found that was true because
Okay, we cannot
with another guy.
Fadil, we're having a bit of a problem with your line. Can barely make out what you're saying. I don't know if we increase the volume a little bit in here in studio. But kindly, if you could slowly take us through the question again.
Okay, I want to ask Mr. Chris, that I had a relationship which actually took promise and was getting engaged to my lady. But later on I discovered that she was with another guy and that we had moved in. I decided to cut off the relationship. Later on she told me that she had a pregnancy. And now at some point I don't know whether to revive the relationship or just to leave it like that. So I don't know what Mr. Chris is actually doing on that.
Right. I have barely made out what he
No, I
said.
don't- I
The
don't
line, I
either.
don't know whether it's, I don't know. Fadil, we're having a bit of a problem with your connection. Sorry about that. We cannot make out what you're saying. But if it's not too much to ask, if you could SMS or tweet us, we will for sure handle that for you. But thank you for watching and calling in, of course. So Chris, it does happen very easily. It's the natural thing. You're seated next to somebody at work, or even just one of the friends who perhaps has secretly eyed this
Yes, absolutely.
person.
And
you
you know,
start
I hate
talking
to
to
say
them.
this, but all's fair in love and war. And you know, the barmaid, the girl you just happened to meet in the wherever, they're all on the make, every single one. And so your spouse, male or female, is always very vulnerable. And so if you are basically mistreating them in any way, whether it's ignoring them or being critical of them or making it hard for them to talk, you are leading them astray in a strange way.
Right.
Yeah.
But conflict will always be there. So the best thing is then to find a perfect, or not perfect, but a good way of conflict resolution
There's
in
nothing
marriage.
wrong with having conflict in a relationship,
Yeah.
providing that you handle it professionally. You know, in other words, you listen to the other person's issues, you actually debate them properly without being defensive or
Right.
trying to blame them,
Right.
and you actually consciously try to do something to put things right. Now, if you do that, conflict will not be a problem.
Okay.
In fact, some of the most vulnerable relationships are the ones where people never bring up issues. They simply don't say that they've got a problem. And then all of a sudden, to your utter amazement, you discover they're buying furniture and planning to move into a new flat.
Yeah. But also key that it's an investment of time with this person to keep it going, to keep the fire burning.
Yes.
It's just like lighting up a fire, and if you leave it, you know, it will die at some
Yes.
point.
I mean, in a perfect relationship, you both look forward to seeing one another in the evenings, and you both put a lot of time and effort into just making the relationship truly intimate. Emotionally, of course, but also physically. Let's be blunt about this. The thing that makes a marriage different from anything else is that people have sex together. And if you are not actually having an intimate relationship, the worst is going to happen sooner or later.
Okay. Intimacy is the biggest one, Chris, as we wind up. That must be always working and working best way it can.
Yes.
Both
Yes.
parties must be satisfied and happy.
Intimacy in both senses of the word.
Yeah.
You know, emotional intimacy, you must feel warm towards your spouse. You must be able to talk about anything. You must feel that you're both paying attention to one another. And as the Nike advert says, if you see a glimmer in her eye, just do it. You
Yeah.
just must.
Chris Hart, thank you for joining us this
Great
morning.
pleasure.
And those are some of the great tips you can affair-proof your marriage, because definitely it does not have to go through the turmoil that some marriages go through. It's something that, as you've heard from Chris, definitely is a lot of work, but if you put in the work, play your part, give it 100%, then definitely things should work out for you. I hope you've learned a thing or two. We're just